kind of calm that no one pays attention to until later. People on Earth were busy with their usual routines. Some were going to work. Some were preparing breakfast for their kids. Some were simply scrolling through their screens, half awake and half interested in the news. Most people had heard that a large rescue convoy was leaving Earth that week, but they didn't think much of it. Earth had sent help before, and it wasn't something unusual. But for the people directly involved, in that convoy, the day felt big, almost historic. The rescue mission had been planned for months. A distant colony had suffered a terrible environmental collapse. Their crops had failed, their hospitals were overloaded, and their power systems had been damaged by a chain of storms. They weren't enemies, allies, or rivals. They were simply people who needed help. That was enough. Earth responded fast. Scientists, medical teams, engineers, and volunteers stepped forward. Some came from big agencies. Others were ordinary people who just wanted to do something good. They trained together, prepared supplies together, and formed friendships quickly. Everyone understood the mission clearly. Help those who could not help themselves. The convoy was huge, dozens of ships carrying medicine, clean water units, food, blocks, temporary shelters, technicians, and people ready to work day and night once they reached the colony. Cameras from Earth's media stations covered the entire launch. Families of the volunteers stood behind the safety barriers, waving and shouting final messages to their loved ones. Some smiled proudly. Some cried quietly. Some just held on to each other, hoping everything would go well. The volunteers inside the ships felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Many of them had never traveled so far into space. It wasn't a war zone, but still, it felt like stepping into the unknown. They relied on their training, on each other, and on the clear promise given by the neighboring factions. The convoy would have safe passage. That promise was repeated again and again through official channels. No one doubted it. When the ships finally lifted off, the engines lit the skies with a soft blue glow. On Earth, millions of people watched the broadcast. Some recorded the moment on their devices, even though it was already being saved by every major news platform. The launch represented something pure humanity, helping without asking for anything back. It reminded people that even with all the arguments and divisions on Earth, there were moments when everyone stood on the same side. Hours turned into days as the convoy moved deeper into space. Life on board settled into a routine. The volunteers checked equipment, kept logs, shared meals, and sometimes stared out of the windows to watch stars drift by in slow motion. Whenever a camera turned on, they waved and joked playfully, trying to look cheerful for the people watching back home. Some recorded messages for their families, promising to return soon. One technician showed a picture of a small plant he carried from home, saying he wanted to grow it on the disaster-hit colony, even if only for a week, just to make someone smile. On Earth, everything looked normal. News reporters talked about the convoy's progress. Analysts discussed how long the mission would take. Children in schools drew pictures of rescue ships in art class. People felt connected to the mission, even from far away. The story gave them something hopeful to follow, but in another corner of space, things were not as calm. A powerful faction near the damaged colony was growing restless, though this was not widely known. They believed they should control the region and resented Earth's involvement, even though the mission was purely humanitarian. They had a reputation for acting boldly, sometimes recklessly, but they had never directly attacked a rescue mission. Even they had rules, or so everyone thought. A few analysts on Earth hinted during interviews that it would be wise to stay alert, but their concerns were brushed aside. The convoy is clearly marked, the agency said. Every ship has humanitarian insignia visible from far away. No one would be foolish enough to see that as a threat. The crew inside the convoy felt the same. They joked that their ships looked too harmless for anyone to even bother aiming at. They carried no weapons. Their hulls were painted with bright symbols recognized across the galaxy. They followed the safe route through the transit corridor exactly as instructed. Everything followed standard protocol. The days passed peacefully. The volunteers began preparing for arrival, organizing supply lists, planning work groups, going over instructions for unloading materials. Some stayed awake late, imagining what the colony might look like when they reached it. They checked maps, satellite images, and earlier reports. They understood the people there needed help fast, and they were determined to reach them in time. Meanwhile, on Earth, people prepared for the next live update from the convoy. It was scheduled for the next morning in most regions. News channels advertised it, telling viewers they would hear from some of the volunteers directly. Families planned to wake up early to watch. Many expected to hear light-hearted stories about life aboard the ships, or maybe see a few smiles and jokes. No one imagined that this would be the last normal moment before everything changed. Inside one of the convoy ships, a volunteer sat by a window with a small camera, recording a message for her family. She talked about the stars, the silence, and how beautiful the galaxy looked when seen without a screen. In another ship, a group of engineers were practicing emergency drills, not because they expected trouble, but because training was routine. They laughed when one of them tripped over a toolbox, and the others jokingly declared him least prepared for anything. Everyone felt relaxed. That night or morning, depending on where you were on Earth, the convoy moved into the transit corridor. They were on schedule. The path was open and clear. Traffic maps showed no other major groups of ships nearby. The communication from Earth's command center wished them a safe final stretch and reminded them to check in at the next marker. Inside the lead ship, the captain looked at the star-filled view and said quietly to the navigator, "Almost there." The navigator nodded, adjusting a few controls, not knowing that these would be among the last calm words spoken. Only a few minutes later, the sensors on multiple ships picked up something unexpected movement approaching from the edge of their path. A sudden blip, then another, then several more. At first, the crew believed it was just a passing patrol or a trade group. Nothing strange about that. The interstellar routes often crossed with other fleets, but something felt slightly off. The unidentified ships were moving fast, faster than normal patrols, faster than anything that should be near a rescue mission. Communications were sent out politely, asking the approaching ships to identify themselves. No reply came back. Volunteers didn't panic. They trusted procedures. They trusted logic. No one attacks clearly marked humanitarian ships. Not in this era. Not after so many agreements and alliances had been formed. On Earth, people were sleeping peacefully or winding down their day. Families of the volunteers had no idea that the convoy had just detected something unusual. News anchors had no idea. Leadership committees had no idea. The entire planet was unaware that within the next few hours, everything they believed about safety, cooperation, and humanity's progress would be shaken to the core. Inside the convoy, the signals grew louder. Approaching ships closed in. Some volunteers gathered around the windows, trying to see something, but all they could make out were distant shapes. Someone joked nervously that maybe they were just curious onlookers. Another volunteer said maybe they were trying to escort them. The mood wasn't fearful, just confused. Yet deep inside, in the control rooms, the officers felt something else: uncertainty. Something wasn't matching any standard patterns. Emergency codes weren't being returned. Requests for identity confirmation were being ignored. Every second that passed felt heavier. Still, no one expected danger. Not yet. The rescue ships continued forward, following protocol, trusting that the universe still respected humanitarian missions. And Earth, unaware of what was unfolding, slept under quiet skies. Part 1 ends in that moment of calm before the first crack appears, before the event that would shake Earth so deeply that the world would change in a single day. The exact moment when confusion quietly turns into concern inside the rescue convoy. No one panics yet, but something in the air feels different. The crew can sense it the way people can sense a storm before it arrives, even when the sky still looks clear. Inside the lead ship, one of the volunteers is sitting near a window when she notices a faint set of lights far in the distance. They're small at first, like tiny dots moving against the starfield. She thinks nothing of it and keeps talking to a teammate about the work they'll do once they reach the colony. They laugh lightly, trying to imagine who will get the hardest tasks. But she glances back again and realizes the dots are larger. Now dash closer. Across the convoy, similar moments happen everywhere. Someone in the engineering section squints at a sensor. A medical worker pauses during inventory. A young technician checks the navigational readings twice, and a third time. It's as if the entire convoy feels a strange shift, but no one wants to be the first to say it. The crew sends out another polite message to the incoming ships, asking for identification. Still no reply. This silence is unusual, and even the calmest people on board feel it. In the communications room, the officers exchange looks. Their training tells them to stay steady, not to jump to conclusions, not to assume danger. After all, this mission is peaceful. Every ship is marked with bright humanitarian symbols. Their route was approved by all neighboring factions. They filed every document, followed every rule. One of the officers quietly checks the logs again, scrolling through lines of data, hoping to find something that makes sense. Maybe it's just a patrol that forgot to respond. Maybe it's a cargo group passing by. Maybe the signals are distorted. Anything would be better than the uneasy silence. That keeps growing. On Earth, the next morning begins like any other. People get ready for school, for work, for errands. A few households plan to tune in for the convoy's update later that day. Children eat breakfast, while parents remind them not to spill juice on their uniforms. No one knows that in space, something is moving fast toward the rescue ships. Inside one of the convoy ships, a small group gathers near a viewing window. They're excited, thinking they might see new spacecraft up close. Some pull out small recording devices to film the moment. The mood is cautious, but not fearful. These volunteers have been living in a hopeful mindset for weeks, preparing to help strangers. It's hard for them to imagine anyone wanting to harm them, but one of the older volunteers feels uneasy. He doesn't say much, but his eyes stay fixed on the approaching lights. He's traveled through space several times, and something about the formation of those lights doesn't feel right. They're too precise, too aggressive in speed, too quiet. He finally speaks up, suggesting they all step away from the window and head to their assigned stations. Some listen immediately, trusting his experience. Others hesitate, still thinking. This is nothing unusual. Meanwhile, in the control room, alarms don't ring, but proximity warnings start flashing faintly. The officers' voices tighten. They contact Earth's command center, explaining that unknown ships are approaching quickly and not responding. The message takes time to reach Earth, which means the convoy is on its own for the moment. The ships. Captain issues a calm announcement over the intercom. Her voice is steady, reassuring. She tells everyone that unidentified vessels are near, but protocols are in place, and they are following all emergency communication steps. Volunteers look at one another, nodding, trusting her tone. The goal is to remain organized, not frightened. People return to their roles. Medical teams secure equipment. Engineers strap tools to racks. Support staff begins running safety checks, just in case. They move quickly, but without panic, the way firefighters prepare before heading into a risky situation. They hope none of this preparation will be needed. Inside the second ship, a young volunteer sits with her hands shaking slightly. She tries to steady her breathing. A teammate places a hand on her shoulder, telling her it's okay, that maybe the other ships just want to scan them out of curiosity. She smiles weakly, trying to believe him. Another volunteer sits quietly, writing a short message on a small digital pad, something he plans to send to his brother once they reach the colony. He doesn't know why he suddenly feels the need to write, but something inside urges him to. He keeps the message lighthearted, talking about the stars and the strange silence of space. In a different ship, two engineers talk about the approaching signals. One insists that it's probably nothing. The other shakes his head, whispering that the speeds look wrong. They both fall silent when another faint alert flashes across their screen. Earth's command center finally receives the convoy's message. Technicians rush to analyze the data. Leaders are notified immediately. A room full of officials gathers around a large holographic map, watching the unknown ship's trajectory. They send out emergency communications to the faction in question, demanding to know why their ships are moving toward a rescue mission at such high velocity. Earth receives no answer. The technicians send more messages to the convoy. Stay calm. Hold formation. Do not provoke. Do not alter course unless completely necessary. Help is being mobilized, but space is large and help cannot arrive instantly. Back inside the convoy, one of the volunteers tries to lighten the mood by joking about alien traffic jams. Some laugh nervously. Others don't laugh at all. Even humor feels thin now. The approaching ships finally become visible enough for everyone to see. They aren't shaped like trade vessels or peaceful escorts. Their silhouettes are sharper, their lights colder. This is the moment when everyone on board, even the most optimistic, realizes something is wrong. A quiet fear spreads through the cabins, not loud, not chaotic, but the kind of fear that sits heavily on the chest. People look at one another with wide, questioning eyes. How could a rescue convoy ever be seen as a threat? The intercom crackles again. The captain's voice returns, slightly firmer this time. She instructs everyone to secure themselves and remain in designated areas. She repeats that communications are ongoing and that Earth is aware. Some volunteers whisper small prayers. Others hold hands. Some stare at the walls, trying to steady their breathing. The older volunteer from earlier buckles himself into a seat and whispers to no one in particular. I hope this is just a misunderstanding. Outside, the unknown ships shift formation. They're no longer approaching in a straight line. There, surrounding, sensors inside the convoy beep in sharp, unsettling rhythms. Officers exchange urgent looks. They send one last message to the approaching vessels, reminding them that the convoy is unarmed, clearly marked, and on a humanitarian mission. Once. Again, no answer. Inside Earth's command center, voices rise. Some officials demand that immediate protective action be taken. Others argue that they still have time for diplomacy. But no one in the room feels truly confident. The screen showing the convoy blinks with too many red indicators. Families on. Earth still don't know anything. They're making breakfast, picking up kids from school, taking morning walks, and going about their normal lives. They have no idea their loved ones are staring through windows at ships that should not be there. Inside the convoy, a young volunteer feels tears forming in her eyes. Another volunteer whispers to her that everything will be okay, even though he's unsure himself. Human instinct makes people comfort each other even when they don't have answers. The unknown ships stop moving for a moment. This pause, strangely, feels even worse. It's as if the galaxy is holding its breath, One officer, inside the lead ship, presses his palms against the console, whispering, "Please, don't do anything foolish." But in the next instant, sensors flare. Something activates on the unknown vessels. Light gathers at their tips. Officers shout confirmations to each other, and alarms finally begin to sound. The volunteers don't understand what's happening yet. They hear the alarms, but not the technical explanations. All they know is that something is wrong, deeply wrong. On Earth, a technician stares at the live feed, eyes widening as data spikes. He shouts for the room to look. Officials rush toward the monitors. Families still have no idea. Inside the convoy, everything changes in a split second. The ships tremble lightly. Some volunteers clutch the seats or each other. People shout the names of teammates, just to make sure they're nearby. In the viewing window, the older volunteer whispers 3 words filled with disbelief. "They're targeting us." And before anyone can fully understand, before Earth can intervene, before the volunteers can process what their eyes are seeing, the first strike begins. Part 2 ends in that suspended moment of shock, before the world sees what happens next, before Earth realizes that a peaceful mission has been attacked for the first time in its modern history. Inside the convoy, the moment after the first impact is strangely quiet. Not because nothing happened, but because everyone is still trying to understand it. People blink, hold on to their seats, look at each other with wide eyes. They feel the vibration in the walls, the floor, the railings. They hear muffled noises through the ship-rattling equipment, loose objects shifting, alarms chiming one after another. But their minds are still catching up. No one screams. No one speaks right away. The human brain needs time to accept the unexpected, especially when it goes against everything logical. A young volunteer grabs a railing, trying to steady herself. She whispers to the person next to her, "Did they just?" He doesn't reply because he doesn't know the answer. Or maybe he does, and he doesn't want to say it out loud. In the control room, the captain demands updates from every station. Her voice is steady, but her hands grip the console tightly. Officers respond quickly, checking systems, confirming damage levels, sending emergency reports to Earth. Their training kicks in. They focus, because focusing is the only thing that keeps panic away. Another shock travels through the ship, but softer this time, almost like a warning. Panels flicker. Lights dim for a moment. The crew glances at one another, fear hiding behind. Calm expressions. The captain commands the convoy to maintain formation and activate all defensive safety measures, not weapons, because they have none, but things like emergency shields, power rerouting, and structural support protocols. These systems aren't designed for fights. They're designed to protect against space debris, small collisions, or unexpected turbulence. They were never meant for this. Across the convoy, volunteers look out the windows and finally see what's happening clearly. The unidentified ships are firing. The beams are aimed directly at them. It doesn't matter that they're unarmed, or that humanitarian symbols cover their hulls, or that this mission was public, peaceful, and approved. The truth hits everyone at once, and it feels unreal. They are being targeted. Inside a medical section, someone drops a tablet. It clatters on the floor, echoing loudly in the tense silence. A medic bends to pick it up with trembling hands. She looks up, trying to reassure the others, but her voice cracks when she says, "We'll be okay. We're trained for emergencies." She doesn't sound confident, but sometimes saying something is better than saying nothing. In a different ship, a group of engineers works together to stabilize the power grid. They talk fast, but stay focused. Even in fear, humans know how to adapt. One of them keeps repeating softly, stay steady," as he adjusts controls. Another volunteer, closes his eyes and mutters a quick, quiet prayer. He's not religious normally, but in moments like these, people reach for anything that gives comfort. A teammate places a hand on his shoulder, not saying a word, just showing support. Meanwhile, far away on Earth, the first data from the convoy reaches the command center. Technicians freeze, staring at their screens. Numbers spike. Alerts flash red. For a few seconds, the entire room is silent. Then chaos erupts, commands shouted, phones ringing, leaders rushing in from nearby offices. A large display screen shows the convoy's communication feed. Only fragments at first. Static, distorted audio. But slowly, it becomes clear. The convoy is under attack. No one in the room wants to believe it. It goes against every rule of space diplomacy, every treaty. Signed, every promise made by the neighboring factions. A peaceful rescue team, carrying medicine and water, being fired upon, feels like something from a past era, an era humanity thought it had left behind. Earth's officials immediately send urgent messages to the attacking faction, demanding explanations. They send warnings. They send pleas. Every channel is used. Every frequency. Every language format. No reply. The officials look at one another with expressions that are almost painful. They know what this silence means. Across Earth, families of the volunteers begin their mornings normally. One family is preparing lunch. Another is helping a small child tie their shoes. Some are still asleep. Some are at work. None of them know that their loved ones are in danger. But news travels fast. Within minutes, several major broadcasting networks interrupt regular programming. A calm but tense anchor appears on screen, explaining that the rescue convoy has encountered unexpected aggression. At first, the message is cautious, because details are still unclear. But as more data pours in, the story changes from unexpected aggression to something far more serious. People watching at home feel their hearts drop. Some stand up from their couches. Some whisper, "No," under their breath. Others rush to call family members, even though the lines are already overloaded. Back in the convoy, the situation becomes more unstable. Systems struggle under the repeated hits. Lights flicker in some corridors. Volunteers hold on to straps and railings as the ship shakes. Officers shout updates, trying to keep everything running. One volunteer, sitting beside a window, watches as part of another convoy ship flickers with sparks. She covers her mouth with her hand, eyes filling with tears. She doesn't speak because she knows anything she says might make things worse. Another group of volunteers crouches near the floor, bracing themselves. One of them tries to distract the others by asking about their families, their hobbies, anything normal. Their voices tremble, but the effort matters. In fear, people hold on to normal moments tightly. The captain checks the communication panel for Earth's response. A message arrives. Help is mobilizing. Stay steady. Hold position if possible. She forwards the message across the convoy. To calm everyone. A small wave of relief passes through the volunteers. They know Earth is coming. They know they are not forgotten. On Earth, leaders make fast decisions. Emergency meetings begin immediately. Representatives from multiple nations sit together, watching the convoy feed with grim expressions. No one argues. No one delays. The attack is clearly deliberate. Every sign points to an intentional strike. Earth's defenses begin moving. Fleets are activated. Rescue teams prepare. Communications officers try one last time to contact the attacking faction. Still no answer. Across Earth, people gather in front of screens. Schools pause lessons. Workplaces halt everything. There's something about seeing humanity's helpers, ordinary people who volunteered out of kindness, being attacked that unites everyone instantly. In the convoy, one volunteer whispers to another, Why would anyone do this? The other shakes his head. I don't know, but we need to stay strong. Another soft impact shakes the ship. The volunteers grab onto whatever they can. Someone drops a water bottle, and the thud sounds louder than it should. A young technician whispers, "It's okay. It's okay." Even though his voice is shaking, still the convoy holds together. The crew's training pays off. Despite the fear, despite the confusion, they remain coordinated. They keep the ships aligned. They keep life support stable. They keep one another calm. Back on Earth, a leader stands before a global communication screen, speaking firmly to the public. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't use dramatic language. She simply explains what has happened. A peaceful rescue convoy, carrying supplies and volunteers, has been attacked without warning. People watching at home feel anger growing inside them. Not violent anger, but the kind of anger that comes from seeing something deeply unfair. Mothers grip the backs of chairs. Old men shake their heads in disbelief. Young people stare at the screen with stunned expressions. The leader promises that Earth will respond, not out of revenge, but out of duty to protect those who help others. To make sure humanitarian missions are never targeted again. She ends her speech with a line that becomes unforgettable. When you harm people who carry hope, you harm every heart on Earth. In the convoy, volunteers receive Earth's updated message. It tells them that help is already on the way, and they just need to survive a little longer. The message gives them strength. Some wipe tears from their eyes. Others whisper small words of gratitude. The unknown ships continue pressing in, but the convoy refuses to fall apart. The crew coordinates carefully, moving in near-perfect unity. Officers shout instructions. Volunteers secure anything loose. Medics gather emergency packs in case they're needed. Everyone works together, not because they're brave, but because they have no choice, and because the people beside them matter. Earth's fleets speed toward their position. Rescue ships race ahead. Communications teams relay updated coordinates over and over. Every second feels like an hour. Inside the convoy, the captain looks at the star-filled view and whispers softly, "Hold on." The volunteers hold hands, brace themselves, and wait. And across Earth, millions of people watch with tears in their eyes, anger in their hearts, and a silent promise forming. This will not be allowed to happen. When I woke up the next morning, my mind was still full of everything that had happened the day before. It was strange how one simple conversation could shift the direction of a whole life. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the words that person had said to me, the warnings, the little hints about trust, and the strange feeling that something bigger was happening behind the scenes. I didn't fully understand it then, but I felt something changing inside me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something in between, like standing on the edge of something new and not knowing if you were supposed to jump or turn. Back, the morning air felt cold when I stepped out of bed. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. I walked slowly to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window. Outside, people were already moving, walking fast as if the whole world was in a rush. Cars passed, kids in uniforms waited for buses, and shopkeepers opened their shutters with half-sleepy eyes. Everything looked normal, but I didn't feel normal. I felt like I was watching life from a few steps back, as if something was urging me to see the bigger picture. While I sipped my tea, I thought about the promises I had made to myself. I had decided not to run away from my problems this time. I had done that so many times before, pretending things didn't matter, acting like I didn't care, avoiding conversations that scared me. But something about this experience, something about how unexpectedly things had unfolded, pushed me to face things honestly. Maybe for the first time in years, I felt like I had to stop escaping Dot later in the day. I stepped outside for some fresh air. The sky was bright, but slightly hazy, the kind of weather where the sun tries to shine, but gets blocked by a thin layer of clouds. I walked without any real destination, letting my feet decide the direction. I passed familiar houses, familiar shops, familiar people, yet everything felt slightly different. It was like seeing the city for the first time again. While walking, I replayed the moment I met that person who had warned me. Their expression, their voice, and the seriousness. In their eyes, none of it felt random. It was as if they knew more than I expected, as if they were preparing me for something. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also couldn't pretend their words didn't matter. Something told me life was about to take a turn, and I needed to be ready. I reached a small park and sat on a bench under a large tree. A soft breeze moved the leaves above me, creating a gentle whispering sound. A few children played on the swings, laughing so loudly that their joy spread across the whole area. Watching them made me smile without even realizing it. It reminded me that life wasn't just about problems or worries. It was also about moments, simple, small, peaceful moments that people often ignored. But my thoughts didn't stay calm for long. Soon, they drifted back to the message I had received the previous evening. The message wasn't long, but it had a strange weight to it. It was something like a hint, almost like an invitation, to look deeper into what was going on. The words were careful, almost too careful, as if written by someone who understood the consequences of saying too much. I had read it over and over again, trying to understand the hidden meaning behind it. As I sat there, I wondered if I should reply. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely and pretend nothing was happening. Another part of me, the part that had been awakened recently, wanted to follow the path being opened in front of me. I didn't know which one was the right choice, but I knew one thing for sure. Staying silent wouldn't stop anything. Silence only delays the truth. It doesn't prevent it. After sitting for a long time, I finally stood and continued walking. I wasn't tired, but my mind felt heavy. I needed to clear it somehow, so I walked toward the old street where I used to spend time as a teenager. It had been years since I visited that area. Most people avoid the places tied to their past, especially if they're connected to memories that aren't comfortable. But I felt like going there, like maybe I would understand something about myself if I did. When I reached the street, I felt a strange wave of nostalgia. The bakery at the corner was still there, though its sign had faded. An old cafe had been replaced by a small mobile accessories shop, and the empty lot where I used to play with kids from the neighborhood had been turned into a parking area. Time changes everything, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, but it always moves forward. I stood near the parking area, remembering how easily life had felt back then. No worries, no pressure, no complicated choices. Just simple moments running around, laughing, arguing over silly games, celebrating small victories like they were huge achievements. I wondered when life became so heavy. I wondered if it was something that slowly happens to everyone as they grow older, or if I had let it become this way. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. It was another message, short, but this one felt more direct. It said, "We need to talk. You deserve to know everything." My heart dropped for a moment. The message didn't look threatening. It looked honest. But honesty can be the scariest thing in the world when you're not ready for what comes with it. I sat on a nearby step, staring at the screen. I wanted to reply, but I didn't know what to say. Do I ask what they meant? Do I ask why they chose me? Do I ask what everything even refers to? My thumb hovered over the keyboard, yet I couldn't type anything. It wasn't fear. It was the weight of knowing that once I opened that door, there would be no turning back. Once truth comes out, it changes everything forever. For several minutes, I kept the phone in my hand, silently debating with myself. I thought about all the things I had avoided in the past, all the opportunities I walked away from, all the moments when I chose silence over courage. Maybe it was time to stop doing that. Maybe this moment wasn't here to scare me. It was here to give me a chance. With a deep breath, I typed only 2 words: "I'm listening." And I sent it back as soon as the message delivered. A strange calmness settled over me. I didn't know if I had made the right choice, but I felt lighter, as if taking the step was more important than worrying about the consequences. The reply came quicker than I expected. "Meet me today. Same place as before. Don't worry, you're safe." I read that message 3 times. The words "you're safe" stayed in my mind longer than the rest. It wasn't that I felt unsafe, but those words made me realize how serious things might actually be. People don't reassure you unless there's a reason behind it. I stood up slowly and began walking back, my steps a little quicker now. I felt a mixture of curiosity and tension building inside me. The city around me continued moving like nothing was happening, but to me, it felt like the world was shifting subtly in the background. I didn't know what I was about to walk into, but I knew I had to go. Something inside me kept repeating that this meeting would answer questions I didn't even know I had. When I reached home, I took a moment to sit on the edge of my bed and just breathe. I didn't want to rush into the moment without thinking clearly. I closed my eyes and tried to center my mind, reminding myself that whatever happened next, I needed to stay grounded and calmed out. As the time for the meeting approached, I felt my heartbeat slow down instead of speeding up. It was strange. I expected to panicking, but instead, I felt ready. Ready to hear the truth. Ready to face whatever was coming. Ready to stop running from the things I should have faced long ago. I stepped out of the house again, walking with more purpose this time. The air felt different, cooler, sharper, almost like the beginning of something. And as I moved toward the place where everything would unfold, I wasn't scared. I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking toward answers instead of away from them. And deep inside, I knew this moment would shape everything that came next. When I left home that evening, the sky looked unusually calm, almost too calm, like the world was holding its breath. The sun had already started to melt behind the buildings, painting everything with a soft orange glow. Normally, sunsets made me feel peaceful, but today it felt different. It felt like the universe was quietly preparing me for something important. I didn't know what that something was yet, but I could feel it in the air, in the way the wind moved, even in the way my footsteps sounded on the pavement. I kept walking toward the meeting place, trying to look normal, even though my mind was full of questions. Every step felt heavier than it should, maybe because I knew this conversation would change things. I didn't know how, but I knew it wouldn't be a small change. It would be something deep, something that touches a part of life you usually don't talk about with anyone. As I walked, I noticed little details around me that I usually ignored. A kid feeding birds on the corner, an old man closing his shop with slow, careful hands, a woman adjusting her scarf while laughing at something on her phone. It reminded me how everyone is living their own story, dealing with their own worries, excited about their own small joys. It made my own situation feel both big and small at the same time. Big because it meant something personal. Small because the world was so huge and full of stories happening all at once. When I reached the place, the street was quieter than usual. The area was familiar, but at that moment, it felt strange. Maybe it was because I knew the reason I was standing there wasn't normal. I looked around, trying to spot the person I was supposed to meet, but they weren't there yet. So I walked to the old bench nearby and sat down. I tried to steady my breathing, but my thoughts kept racing like they had a life of their own. I checked my phone again, even though there were no new messages. Sometimes people check their phones not because they expect something new, but because they don't know what else to do with their hands. I think that was the case for me at that moment, just when I started to doubt whether they'd show up. I heard footsteps approaching slowly. I didn't turn immediately. I waited a second, let the sound come closer, and then finally looked up. There they were, calm, serious, and exactly the same expression they had the last time we spoke. No smile, no fear, just a quiet focus. They sat down beside me, not too close, not too far, keeping a respectful distance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was an awkward silence, though. It felt like both of us were waiting for the right moment, the right breath, the right starting point. Finally, they spoke. "You came," they said softly. "I said I would," I replied. They nodded lightly, as if that was something they fully expected. Then they took a quiet breath, looked straight ahead, and continued. "There's something you need to understand," they said, "and I want you to hear everything without assuming the worst. Some things sound scary only because we don't know the whole story." Their voice wasn't dramatic or intense. It was calm in a way that made me trust them even more. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. "You're involved in something you didn't choose," they continued. "You didn't ask for this, but life put you in the middle of it anyway. And I don't want you to be confused or worried without knowing why." My heart tightened slightly, but I stayed quiet. They continued, "There are people who watch you. Not in a dangerous way, not in a spying way, but in a observing way, because something about you stands out. Something about the way you think, the way you react, the choices you make. They've noticed." I frowned a little, not out of fear but confusion. It didn't make sense to me. I wasn't someone special. My life had been normal, messy, full of mistakes, full of ordinary moments. What could possibly be so interesting about that? Before I could ask anything, they explained further. "Sometimes," they said, "the world needs someone who sees things differently. Someone who doesn't follow the crowd blindly. Someone who questions but also listens. Someone who can be calm in the middle of uncertainty. You're one of those people." I looked at them directly then. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Because you don't run away," they said. "Even if you think you do, deep down you don't. You face things. You try to understand them. And there are people who believe someone like you can shape something important." Their words didn't feel like flattery. They felt sincere, honest, but they also felt heavy. It's strange how a few sentences can make your life feel bigger than it used to be. They took out something from their pocket, a small folded piece of paper. "I want you to read this," they said, handing it to me. My fingers shook slightly as I opened it. Inside, there were only a few lines written in a simple, clear handwriting. "You will face choices. Some will be easy. Some will hurt, but none of them are accidents. Nothing in your life is random. Everything is leading you somewhere you're meant to be." I read the words twice, maybe 3 times. They didn't reveal anything concrete. They didn't tell me what would happen. But they carried a weight, like they came from someone who knew more than they were allowed to say. "Who wrote this?" I asked. They hesitated for a moment. Not because they didn't want to answer, but because the answer itself required care. "It's from someone who has been watching over you for a long time," they said. "Someone who believes you're capable of more than you realize. Someone who thinks you need to know that your life isn't as random as you think." I folded the paper and held it carefully, as if it might slip away if I wasn't gentle. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked softly. "For now," they said, "you just prepare. You stay aware. You listen to your instincts. And you don't ignore things that feel important. Something is coming. Not something dangerous or violent. Something meaningful. There. Tone was steady, not dramatic, not mysterious. Just honest. And when it comes, they added, you'll know. For a moment, we both sat quietly again. I felt the weight of the evening settling in my chest, not heavy in a painful way, but in a meaningful way, like something deep inside me was waking up after being asleep for years. After a long pause, they stood up slowly. I'll contact you again soon, they said. Until then, trust yourself more than anything else. I nodded. I didn't say goodbye. The moment felt too delicate for normal words. They walked away quietly, disappearing around the corner, leaving me sitting on the bench with the folded note in my hand. I looked up at the sky again. The orange glow had faded. The first few stars were starting to appear. I sat alone for several minutes, thinking about everything I had just heard. Part of me felt overwhelmed. Part of me felt strangely relieved. But the biggest part of me felt something new, sensed that maybe my life had a purpose I hadn't discovered yet. When I finally stood up and began walking home, I felt different. Not stronger, not braver, just clearer. Like something inside me had aligned in a way I didn't understand yet. The night air felt cooler when I stepped back into the street. People passed by, not knowing anything about the shift happening inside me. But I didn't need anyone to understand it. Some moments in life are personal in a way words can't explain. As I walked home, one thought kept echoing quietly in my mind. Nothing in your life is random. Maybe it was true. Maybe the small choices, the mistakes, the unexpected moments, all of it was pushing me toward something. Something I wasn't ready to see before. But now, for the first time, I felt ready to follow wherever this path was leading. And deep inside, I knew part 6 of my life was about to begin long before I even reached my door.